Hey everybody, Professor Snart just checking in here as we continue working through our World Lit class. So we just finished up Unit 4, which is the Roots of Spirituality, due Thursday, September 16th, which is yesterday, so today's Friday. And now we look at Unit 5, which is, it's called a midterm essay, and I know it's not midterm, we're still a couple weeks away from that, but I wanted to bump this a little earlier than the actual midterm for the course. Just because it gives us a really good opportunity to kind of take stock a little bit of the readings that we've done so far. And we only really had 3 units of kind of content from the book, and then Unit 1 had some additional readings. But it's a good opportunity to really think about how these readings are functioning together and kind of what effect they're having on us as readers and scholars and that kind of thing. So our midterm essay is coming a little bit early, but it does come at a useful time still, I think. So Unit 5, and I just clicked into it here, has us beginning with Plato's allegory of the cave, which is pretty famous, and you may have heard of it or kind of know a little bit about it, even if you've never actually encountered it before. And it's fairly straightforward, at least in terms of how we want to treat it. And it's not in the book, which is an odd omission, so I'm sending you to a separate website for that. But the basic notion, or the basic allegory that we want to derive from the allegory of the cave is this idea of coming to new knowledge, if you want to think of it that way. And again, there's lots of other complications about the whole philosophy behind what's actually happening, but for us it's really the idea of discovering something new or some way of thinking that we hadn't thought of before, or even discovering certain ideas or texts that we haven't thought of or encountered before. And you can immediately see how that allegory is so applicable for us in a kind of world lit class where so much, especially at the start of what we're reading, is old and from different cultures. So the chances of us having run into it before are pretty slim. Often they're things we've heard of, but not necessarily actually read. So that's the step that we want to take in terms of thinking about what we're reading and now our midterm quote-unquote essay, is the opportunity to apply the allegory of coming to new knowledge to either our experience in the course so far, your individual experience in the course so far, or one of the characters that we've read about, how you can apply this notion of, believing one thing, but then sort of having a different reality revealed to you at the end of a narrative. Or maybe even in sort of the middle is kind of this epiphany moment, and then the character is somehow different after that moment. So there's some background then on the allegory and this very creepy claymation thing, which is creepy not so much for the allegory, but just for the weirdness of claymation itself. But it does bring it to life, which is probably a bad metaphor, but it gives you a sense of kind of the visual part of the allegory of the cave. And so the midterm essay is really the same kind of essay that you've been writing for the discussion board, but instead of posting to a discussion board, you are submitting directly through Blackboard a Word document that you're typing up for this one. So the style of the essay is really in keeping with what we've been doing so far, but because you have the opportunity to work in Word and submit directly to me where there's no one else really reading it, I am looking for a little more polish in this one. Again, we're not concerned too much with basic grammar and mechanics unless those are getting in the way of the idea you're trying to communicate, but maybe a little more polished than something that you type into the discussion board, even though I imagine a number of you are actually typing in a word processor and then pasting into the discussion board, which is a good idea for previous units. Okay, so you have, you've read the allegory of the cave then, and then you have 2 basic options here, so you're choosing just one of them. Using details from at least 3 different textbook readings, discuss how the allegory relates to the experiences of characters you have studied. Again, how have they come to new knowledge or greater insight or understanding of reality that's different than what they understood before? And there's lots of characters to choose from. In fact, it's almost a running theme that what we read are stories of people coming to new knowledge. And the second option is really the same idea, but instead of looking at a separate character, you're really thinking about yourself and how you've come to maybe new understanding or new knowledge, or been exposed to new ideas, and ultimately what effect that has had on you. Although you may really want to kind of project into the future, since these sorts of things aren't maybe as immediate as something that we'd read in a story where a character has some event happen and then is really immediately different. That rarely happens with such immediacy for us. And again, just be aware that you're submitting a file here, so the technical or mechanical part of the submitting the essay is just a little bit different than what we've done in the past. You'll see that the next unit that we work on actually gives you the opportunity to share your essay with a number of other people after you've had the chance to revise it or reflect a little bit further on it. So that's one of the reasons that we're submitting in a slightly different manner this time around. One of the things that I wanted to mention, and just to be careful, because it seems like people are maybe getting a little bit sloppy with their introductions to their essays, largely in an effort to get to really the content of the essay, which is, again, that direct quotation and kind of analysis of the individual texts, is to be careful that you're not crafting a thesis that really just boils down to the statement that I have read excerpts from the Bible and Ramayana, or whatever it happens to be. So that's a statement of fact. I mean, it's happened, but that's not a thesis. Remember, you want to really craft something that is interpretive about connections between characters in those works, or the style of the works, or the kind of message or meaning that's happening in them. So again, keep your thesis focused on the texts that we're reading, in the same way that you're keeping the body paragraphs of your essay focused on the texts that we're reading as well. So in the last unit, there were a lot of theses that really boil down to this statement, well, I have read these three things, and then you go on to discuss them. There's no real statement of how they're connected, other than the fact that you read them, which isn't really a thesis. Okay, so despite the fact that it's not exactly midterm, we do now have the opportunity to think a little more expansively or comparatively about readings that we've done across units, rather than just comparisons within units. As always, if you have questions, or if anything comes up as you're submitting this essay or completing it, just be in touch. I'll talk to everybody soon.